let's see, I got a barbecue to prepare for. I'll give you till tomorrow, and then just hop back in Discord, and then we'll have a nice little conversation. But this time, Concrete, when you ask me a question about explaining something, don't get mad when I have to. Okay?
Look. Here, I'm gonna help you out, right? I'm gonna
Oh,
ask you a
help me,
couple.
please.
Yeah,
How can
I'm
you help
gonna
me?
I'm gonna ask you a couple of things about your barbecue, and I'm gonna be able to judge whether or not this is gonna be a good barbecue or a shitty barbecue. Now,
Okay, I will do that if you tell me what your degree's in.
I don't, dude. Why do you want me to dox myself?
Okay,
Why?
there we go. So
Why?
I figured now. All right, y'all have
Why?
fun with it. I'll
Oh,
see you
you're not
tomorrow,
gonna tell me
Concrete.
Well,
about
that's
your
it.
barbecue?
Don't run away next time. All right, my
You're not
man.
gonna tell me about your barbecue?
Okay, I'll send you pictures. How about that?
Hold
I'll
on a
also send
second.
you a picture of what a loving family looks like, just so you can see it for the first time in
Let me
your
ask
life.
you a question. Do you brine? Do you brine your chicken?
Do I grind my chicken?
Brine.
Brine? No, I don't brine my chicken.
Well,
Dragnauct.
that's a problem. You're gonna lack in juiciness.
I'm
Dra-
sorry. I spent my education doing other things, my man.
Dragnauct, what do you know
don't
about?
read anything else?
Jesus Christ, dude! Nobody cares about him grinding chicken. Dragnaught, what do you know about concrete?
I've spoken to him a few times. He popped up in the Discord like sometime like middle of last year, and I just kind of sat and like listened to him discuss things with other people. He has this really weird penchant, or when things get heated, it automatically becomes a racial issue if he's dealing with someone non-black. I've noticed that. And if it's something like philosophical, he's talking to somebody who knows a little bit of something, like a sock account, he gets really heated really quickly. And it's amazing how fast he goes from 0 to 100 with a simple disagreement, like just terms. And it's like, I don't know what it is about this guy and his sensitivity, but it's up
Very
there.
sensitive. Very
Well, most of his disagreements are based on terms, but but concrete, you actually probably will really, really like concrete if you spend more time with him. He's like, you ever seen Dragon Ball Z? Like, you know that fusion thing that they do? He's like, concrete is like a G-Man and a Leroy doing a fusion dance or putting on earrings or whatever, and then combining into like a super fucking guy, you know? It's like, he's probably your favorite person, but you just don't know it.
Oh, okay. Well, I look forward to dealing with him. I guess I have
Drag.
to, man.
Your dishonesty is like very astounding, but that's fine. If you're gonna run off, please run off. But here's what I would recommend: if you don't want conversations to go sideways, just stay on the topic. Don't delve into the psychoanalysis. Don't delve into the meta.
But you do all that. You do all that.
One second, bro.
He
One
does
second,
it
bro.
every
Don't
time.
delve
Concrete,
into
Hey,
what you're
that's
doing.
One
literally
second, bro.
why the
done.
conversation
almost
took
done.
a turn, is
I'm
because he
almost
was
done, bro.
because
You're never
almost
done
done.
enough,
Just
Concrete.
one second. So don't delve into the self-aggrandizement. Don't delve into the condescension. Just have a normal conversation.
Nobody cares about this, Concrete, because you don't apply it to yourself. Nobody cares.
You let your screechers off the hook, just like Tom lets screechers off the hook. You want to delve into psychoanalysis, just like Tom likes to delve into psychoanalysis. You know why?
Concrete, there was less screeching and Dragnaught saying than there ever was here.
You can't stand up for yourself.
Okay, let's stop it right now then. Let's stop it right now then. Let's stop it right now
he
then.
needs to finish his soliloquy.
Let's stop it right now then.
So yeah, I'm about to take off, but so just so you guys know, the whole fucking tangent was because Concrete decided that he wanted to like generalize all atheists on the internet, and I'd asked him some simple questions as to how he came to that conclusion, and then I said, look, man, I don't think that you like that's an accurate depiction of how non-believers interact, and I gave him an example of like a real conversation me and Matt have had, Matt Dillahunty, like in real life, and so the conversation took a life unto itself because I drew a distinction between like hard and soft science, and my explanation wasn't good enough and he didn't understand it, and that's when I was like, look, man, I don't know what to tell you, and then the feelings came out. But like that's probably the best I'm gonna get out of him, because after that the grandstanding about his mystery degree came into play, so I decided to say fuck it. Yeah, his penis so big, guys. It's so big, so big.
You're the victim. You're the innocent guy who just wanted to have a casual conversation.
Shut up, Concrete. Nobody cares about your gaslighting. Jesus Christ.
All right, guys. I'll catch y'all later.
All right,
see you later, Drag. It's been a pleasure.
Been a pleasure to meet you.
You guys are so fucking
You
transparent.
guys are so faggot, faggot, faggot.
Oh, did you guys get a chance to look at the citation that Concrete posted for infinite regression?
No.
All right, just so you guys can also take a look at it at your leisure. I'm gonna post it in.
Does anybody think I'm gonna lose sleep over this?
I absolutely like looking at things in my leisure.
Yes.
Poof.
Yeah, what's going on, guys?
Oh boy.
Oh,
How's it going?
it's Christmas today. I swear to God.
Hey, if he was a transformer, John would be Idiot Prime.
Hey, lucky for you guys, I'm a fucking philosopher. Can I I know you guys. I heard through the grapevine that you guys are having a hard time contemplating ideas, so here I am.
Fuck me, but you're stupid.
I'm not into all those conspiracy theories like you guys are, but have you ever heard of postmodernism?
Dude, they must have like a text group, a group text or something. All these guys, because like they're coming out of the fucking woodwork.
I'm not trying to embarrass you guys or anything like that, or put you guys on the spot.
No, not at all.
I'm not trying to expose you guys as knowing nothing about this subject, but can you guys tell me what you know about postmodernism?
Are you gonna
Oh
fucking
my
bang the
God.
postmodernist drum again?
No thanks.
Oh yeah. Well, it seems to me like none of you know anything about it. I'm just trying to clarify.
You know, the
if
last
that's the
time we
case.
checked, you didn't even fucking know how to define it.
He has said you can't define it. He said that it's not possible to define it. I don't know what the fuck he's talking about.
Postmodernism, as described by the person who first mentioned that term, there's a quote by that person. He said that he described postmodernism as an incredulity towards meta-narratives, or an unwillingness to accept meta-narratives.
I bet you have no.
Does that really help? Does that kind of help you out a little bit?
No, he doesn't.
Does that help you out?
John, why are you going into defining it?
Do you need me to explain to you what the fuck that means? I can.
Why are you contradicting yourself? You say it can't be defining it. You want to spend all your time defining it. What's wrong with you?
No, you misunderstood. I said that it's very hard to define because it's an umbrella term, right? There's like many things that we attribute underneath this postmodern umbrella, like maybe it's intersectionality, deconstructionist, or power. Just certain things like
So
post-structuralism, maybe.
Then. You don't know what it is. Then.
No, never has, never will.
What is postmodernism? I do know what it is. I just try to explain it. I don't think you guys have absorbed anything I just said, so I'll just repeat it for fuck's sake.
It's difficult to absorb bullshit. It doesn't seep through pores.
Hopefully this time you'll get something. So,
like a headache?
The person who first mentioned the term postmodernism in his writings, there's a quote from him, and he described postmodernism as an incredulity towards meta-narratives, right? So we can take, like, for example, certain values of the Enlightenment, right? Certain ideas, entire worldviews, right, were like what we considered meta-narratives. Whether or not you were some atheist who thought the scientific method was the end-all be-all for epistemology, I don't give a fuck, right? But like, I'm just trying to kind of elaborate on what a meta-narrative is. I think you guys can handle that, though. You guys know what that is, right?
Oh, God, help me. Help me.
It's just another simple counterculture movement is all it is, John. I don't know what's so complicated about that.
Oh, so you understand it. Why don't you explain what it is?
The definition right there. I just put it in general chat.
Yeah.
Oh, is there like a legit definition? Hold on, let me check it out.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
There's the definition right there, Brick.
Can you explain what it is?
There's the definition right there, Brick.
Does a definition explain a concept?
Yes. That's what a definition does, you fucking quick cement fucking moron.
In your words?
Yes. You know why? Because my words are the same as their words. That's how a definition works.
Why is this guy screeching?
If you speak English, you have the same words as the definition. Guaranteed. God's above. Why are you? Why? There cannot be a God because he couldn't possibly think it's okay to combine your level of arrogance with your level of stupidity.
I mean, do you guys want to go over the definition?
No, I would rather fucking drag my balls through busted glass than listen to you talk about postmodernism.
Well, I know the most about it, so I mean,
no,
you're lucky
don't.
that
No, you don't.
You honestly
Oh,
think
no, you don't.
any of you know more about it than I do?
We don't care to hear you philosophize about it.
We may know less
All
than
of
you, but that
you.
still doesn't mean you know
How
anything.
does Jack put it? How does Jack put it? All of you put together don't know as much as the tip of my pinky finger. Okay.
Yeah, since the pinky finger is also where your brain happens to reside.
No,
there
but
isn't room
seriously,
for
I've
extra.
been studying this shit. I know more about it than all
No,
of
you
you.
haven't been studying anything. You've been reading about it, and that's very
I mean, we
different
can
from studying.
continue if you want. I just educated you on it. Let's
No,
continue.
you can't
I'll
educate
walk
us
you through it
because
some
you're a
more.
moron, and morons
Because we
don't
both
educate
know
people on anything.
your
Yeah,
ad
so
hominems
fat,
are getting a little
Oh
old
my
and
yeah,
rusty.
fat bitch.
God! No
Yeah, fat bitch.
more,
Why don't you take a look
please.
at the chat, fat bitch, and you'll see that there's a difference between
Jesus.
explain
I'm
and
sorry,
define.
fat bitch. Are you
dumb
talking
fat
about your
bitch.
mother?
Hey,
Look,
this is turning into a shit show really
concrete.
fast. Just calm down. Calm down, guys. No more ad hominems.
Oh, shut up, John. Fuck, you're stupid.
Let's get rid of those.
Yeah, but I don't know if you want to say postmodernism is the rejection of meta narratives or the questioning of them.
Not really. Yeah, not really the questioning or rejection. It's like an unwillingness. It's a kind of, it's a certain attitude. It's like an unwillingness to accept them. Like, this is clearly
right.
What's so fascinating here, and I think the only place we can go from here, because these guys are just stuck on we can't define it. Hey, here's a big
what
tip
the fuck are you talking about? We can't define it.
Listen, here's a very big tip in terms of wanting to gain some kind of valuable understanding here when it comes to postmodernism. What you're really after here, what you're really after is trying to psychoanalyze the people who lived during the Enlightenment. That includes Foucault, some of these great thinkers. What you really want to do is kind of psychoanalyze these old Marxists and how they reacted to the Enlightenment. And
Well,
that's
Foucault
when you
didn't
start
live
to
through
get
the
really
Enlightenment.
fascinating insight on the history of these
Jesus
ideas.
fuck!
Like,
Are we gonna have to listen to this for 4 hours again?
what kind of
Are we gonna
attitude
listen to
does
the
it take
same shit for 4 hours?
bring forth postmodernism? Like, where did it come from?
When was the Enlightenment? When do you think the Enlightenment was?
Tom, why do you let Enriquez just speak
It
all
was
day?
when there was a shift in thinking, the scientific method, for example.
What century?
Well,
It's
debatable. Like, people argue about it, but I'd say roughly by the early 17th century we were reaching.
But Foucault didn't live through that. Foucault lived in the 20th century. Just thought I'd point that out
kind
for
of
you.
misspoke. What I meant was Foucault and some of these people, they lived through a time where it was very clear that Marxism and communism had failed. And I think that was a very crucial and vital time. And especially considering these people, like, for example, Foucault and like Derrida and those three, they all got their PhDs in about the same year. They got it all between like 1950 and 1960. All of them got their fucking PhDs around the same time. So I think the point I'm trying to make is that they all lived in a certain time. And the reason why we have so much respect for them is because they knew where we were, philosophically speaking, the best out of anyone. And they reacted to it, and they created what we deem postmodernists, right? We deem them both postmodern philosophers, but they actually didn't deem themselves postmodern philosophers. They just came up with ideas and their ideas, we could clearly tell, had this disdain for the Enlightenment, had the disdain for the Western culture, or this unwillingness to accept it, right? This unwillingness to accept the meta narratives.
What's the point of all this?
The reason why the unwillingness came to be was this crazy disdain for capitalism and
No, you listen. We're not gonna just have you fucking ramble on and on and on. I don't even know what the point is that you're trying to support. What is your fucking claim?
There's not really a claim on the table. We're just
okay. Goodbye. So you just want to vomit out postmodernist fucking talking points. Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, Sam Harris, like just want to vomit out, right? And nobody even knows what the point is you're trying to make? That's what you want?
If any of you want to add anything, you can, but you can't because
add anything to what? A stream of consciousness?
Talk about anything that was said. It is just abundantly clear to me that you want some kind of internet blood sports confrontation debate rather than an open dialogue about a
I will listen to, in fact, I will let you just support whatever it is that you want to support. If you just say that postmodernism is fucking bad or whatever, I'll just let you talk and then we'll just end it. There has to be no, there doesn't even have to be any blood sport. I just need to know what the fuck you are talking about.
Okay, I tried to explain it.
What is it you want to say? What is it you, listen, distill it into a thesis. Tell me what it is that you want to say.
Like an acclaim? Make it a claim? Because I was literally just contemplating the origins of postmodernism, why it is it came about. I was trying to explain the psychology of these postmodern thinkers.
So you want to tell us where postmodernism came from, and who were the postmodernist thinkers?
Yes, I want.
Well, get the fuck out. Who cares? For what point? For why? Why?
Well, a lot of you are influenced by these ideas. The way you think, right? Like a lot of you guys.
Yeah, just like you are. Yeah, you are too.
No, that's not true. I'm a pragmatic thinker, for example. Like last time I questioned you, Tom, it was clear that you need to do a lot of thinking on these subjects, because I literally was getting you to say things like epistemology itself is relative. Like you haven't given these ideas very much thought.
Epistemology is relative?
Yes, and I mean you don't have a very well thought out epistemology.
So
Is
what?
that a subjective or an objective view?
John, so what? Epistemology is relative. So what?
I don't know in what context. I mean, I don't really understand.
The current social phenomenons we see that we deem cancerous, that are a byproduct of intersectionality. The reason why those things exist is because of this underlying idea that epistemology is relative.
What does that mean? Can you I don't remember that conversation. What does that mean, epistemology is relative?
To put it in layman's terms, to put it as simply as possible, it means that you have your truth and I have my truth. That's not what that means. And when you add that into the other postmodern ideas about intersectionality.
Well, it just depends on what you mean by. Just depends on what you mean.
White male, right? You suffer from.
Yeah, whatever. Jesus Christ, dude. It just depends on what you mean by truth, right?
I mean, usually you make fun of Jordan Peterson for asking questions like that, but here you are.
Well, I don't know what you mean. I make fun of Jordan Peterson for saying things like truth is that which helps you survive, or something like some bullshit like that.
Like like I mean like a classical definition of truth. Like truth would be something we garner through things like the scientific method, for example.
But that's
like,
not epistemology.
That's a classic idea of what is true. Like, you know what I mean? Most people.
No, I would say that's the opposite
playing with the idea.
Method.
Huh?
Scientific method's more around falsification, not verification. There's no final truth in science from the output of science, is there? It's all tentative. So it cannot therefore be the truth. It is just the closest approximation of the truth we can get to with the limited methodology and limited knowledge that we have of the world around us.
Yeah, but that position you just took, what's going to stop the next person from adopting your views and saying we don't know anything to be true?
What's going to happen? What's going to happen, John? If
no, let him answer the question. That question was not for you.
No, I was speaking specifically.
How crazy that
no, wait. Okay, if you want me to answer the question, let me do it. So I was talking specifically of the scientific method. Now, specifically around the scientific method, what do you disagree with what I said?
That you said that the scientific method doesn't deal with garnering truth.
No, I did not say that.
So it does?
No, that's called a false dichotomy.
So what is your position?
My position is very, very simple. The scientific method is more about falsification. It's not about verification. The only objective thing really you have in science is the data that you collect, the observation. From that, we draw the best conclusion with the limited knowledge of the universe that we have around us.
I can give this like a really preschool example to try to make it just as simple as possible.
Yeah, science.
I make a claim. Hold on. Let's say that I make a claim I'm at a park, and there's a tree in front of me. There is a tree right in front of me. Now, I make the claim and assertion that there is a tree in front of me. That is true. Any objections to that?
That is true based on your axiomatic position, yeah.
Well, I don't know what you mean by that, but I think the weeds that I'm trying to avoid here is the social constructionist coming along and saying, "Well, you have your truth, I have my truth," and they go so far down the rabbit hole to say something like, they just insert some kind of extreme skepticism and say something like that.
Let me give you a primary school example so we can sort of understand maybe where we're sitting slightly differently. So you're looking at this tree. I'm standing next to you looking at a tree. We both agree the tree is in front of us, but we're both seeing that tree slightly differently. Does that mean neither of those trees that we're viewing, even though they're the same tree, are not the truth? Because we see some difference from the position that we're in.
No, I don't think it makes a difference. It's the same tree.
But we're seeing different bits of that tree.
Yeah. Different bit. I mean, I don't understand the point. Do you think that they're seeing different trees?
No. Did you not listen to what I said?
Nope.
I tried to use really plain, simple English, John. Okay, cool. I'll go back on mute and I'll let someone else play.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm getting confused. I'm trying to, at the moment, shed light on some of the more social constructionist philosophies we see.
Do you want me to break down what you're trying to say in a really, really basic paragraph for you to keep this easy? Which is, the Enlightenment's all a bit shit because it's all a bit too much about capitalism, self-centrism.
Hold on,
and
really
therefore, we move into Enlightenment,
what
which is
you're
the
doing right
injection
now.
of that. And therefore, we can look at communism in a favorable light because, all the postmodernists didn't like capitalism very much. That seems to be where you're coming from if I was going to boil it down.
All right, before I unmute him, he didn't listen to anything you said. But
I'm shocked.
John, what did he just say? John, what did he just say? What did he just say 5 seconds ago?
Well, I didn't realize you muted me. Why was I muted?
Because you were talking over him.
Well, he said he was gonna shut up and mic up, or he literally just muted his mic and shit. So I started talking.
What? He was talking the whole time. You interrupted him. I muted you, and he continued speaking.
Was this after he unmuted himself, or before he unmuted himself?
If he was speaking, he probably wasn't muted.
Yeah, Tom, I may have actually talked across him and not the other way around. And if I'm going to be a bastard to someone, I like to be honest about it.
Well, you had started.
That shit happens all the time, but
it might have been my fault, not John's, to be fair.
No, you're fine, dude.
Yeah,
I'm British. I have to be nice, you see. Otherwise, I'm avoiding my stereotype. And that would not play into John's road of having a preconception defined by the reality around me because I don't understand shit. But I do appreciate his condescension.
Yeah, the first time.
Tom over here trying to shut me down like usual.
Wait till he talked about postmodernism 18 more times, and we go nowhere.
I'm getting confused.
Nowhere, no prescription, nothing. Just fucking postmodernism this, postmodernism that. You don't understand.
He says he knows all about postmodernism. Let's give that a bit of fun.
That's so I did a really good job at explaining that what we're after here is a psychoanalyzation here.
What's your view on the works of
what should we do? I want to know what we should do about postmodernism.
I'm actually interested in John's view of Corbusier. What's your view on Corbusier and postmodernism?
About what? There's a lot of questions at once. What was that?
No. What's your view on Le Corbusier and postmodernism? His work in postmodernism.
Oh, come on, he doesn't know that.
Yeah, I don't know who that is.
Okay.
That's
do you know anything about that? You can share it with us.
Is that an author or painter, artist?
He was an architect and a fucking awesome one. But I thought John June knew everything.
Like John never represented that he knows. He never represented that he knows everything about postmodernism, right?
He might have made that.
Actually, that's exactly what he said, which is why I brought the point up.
He says he has said multiple times he knows. Shut up, John. Shut up.
I might
He
have
said he
said
has.
that
Shut
I knew
up,
the most about
John. Shut up. He has said multiple. Because you're talking over me. He has said multiple times that he knows more about postmodernism than anybody.
Yeah, I agree with that.
In the room. You fucking idiots.
That still doesn't mean everything.
These idiots are gonna be like, "Oh, you're claiming you know more than the philosophers." I mean, come on, guys. What are you doing?
John, let me ask you a question, bro. Please. So what realm of postmodernism do you specialize in? Because obviously, Foolish Decisions brought up postmodernism within architecture. I guess we could talk about postmodernism within music, postmodernism within all sorts of different disciplines. So which one is your specialty?
I specialize in the psychology behind the ideas.
That seems very general, bro.
Well, that's all I'm interested in. I'm someone who is obsessed with psychology and human behavior. I'm only interested in how it is these ideas are possible to propagate. What kind of mindset, what kind of person does it take to be influenced by these ideas? And it seems to me like it's clear as fucking day. It's the Marxists. It was the Marxists.
With regards to postmodernism, political ideas or social ideas?
Well, I don't think any of you are ever going to end up having to fight these people, but these people, there are problems with what they do. They go around acting like, for example, they'll go around deconstructing your entire worldview. They might even claim that you're sexist, misogynistic, the Western capitalist world is evil. But the problem is that when they deconstruct your worldview, they should have stopped right there. But they deconstruct your worldview in a way that is condescending, and they act like they are absolutists themselves, in the sense that they assert that you are evil. They assert that you are sexist, misogynistic. This is obviously a complete contradiction, and you can call them out on it all day long if you want. But these people were butthurt Marxists who they didn't know, like, you have to ask yourself, where do they go in the face of their entire identity and worldview failing miserably? It seems to me like a lot of these Marxists.
What are you talking about, bro?
I'm trying to elaborate.
What are you trying? Elaborate on what? Elaborate on what? What are you trying to say?
What's a return to some kind of something society?
It's just stream of consciousness, dude. This is not how people speak, John. This is not how people speak, right? You can't just stream of consciousness. I want to know what the fuck you're trying to say.
Oh, shut up, John. Shut up. Let Tom finish. Jesus Christ.
You're not putting together a coherent presentation, man.
And you wonder why. I told you guys like 10 times. I said, listen, unfortunately, as much as I would love to talk to you about this shit, none of you are ready to do it.
Jesus Christ.
None of you guys are ready to have a conversation about postmodernism, because it's going to come across as so counterintuitive to you guys that you're not even going to entertain this shit.
Yeah, John,
that's what we see happening over and over.
John, can we talk about delicious Mediterranean dishes like baba ganoush or tabbouleh?
I mean, you could, I don't give a fuck what you talk about, bud.
All right.
I mean, I'm not. We can talk about whatever you want.
Do you like tahini on your penis? No homo.
I don't know what those things are.
Falafel, pita bread.
Concrete, are you trying to create a new ally for yourself?
Who, John?
Yeah.
No, John is like, so John's disloyal to the cause, right? He's a minority who thinks he's not a minority. He likes to try to dab on other minorities. So, no, John's
well, just to be clear, you can't have a conversation with me about postmodernism, because I'm just not going to make any sense to you guys. Like, you'd have to know quite a bit about postmodernism to really take in everything I'm saying.
I'm so done with all that meta bullshit. Come on, John. That is.
Why don't you just start explaining? If you
every
have a
time I
good
do,
grasp on it, you can explain it.
I'm obsessed with. I love these ideas. I try to, but unfortunately, there's only like maybe 3 people that I can have these discussions with.
Enough with the net. See, there you go. You
Take your
cannot
shot.
help. You can't
Yeah,
help.
just
but
take
dive
your
off
shot.
of that
Wants
bullshit.
me to lecture you guys. I think it's rude at this point for me to just sit here and keep lecturing.
Why is it rude? Why is
I
it rude if
agree.
you know? Why is it
I
rude if
agree.
you know?
Because
Why would
they're
it be
getting
rude?
so triggered by it already. Like he asked me if he could talk about something. I'm like, dude,
That's
you talk about
because you
whatever.
just keep
Because I'm
going
talking
on
so
and
much.
on. We don't even know what you're supporting.
Because it's a lecture. None of you know anything about the topic. That's
So
why we
you
can't
want to
talk about it.
just you're saying, guys, let me lecture to you about postmodernism, and none of you can understand it.
Well, the first things I asked when I came in here, right? I said, listen, I'm not trying to put any of you on the spot, but can you guys tell me if you know anything about postmodernism, what it is? And you guys are just at square one where you're like, we can't define this. We can't define postmodernism. And I'm like, listen, guys, this is what it is.
Oh my
Trying to help
God,
you
that
guys
is such a
understand it.
lie.
That's exactly what Gus said to me 20 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago.
You've said the same thing yourself, John. I don't even understand your brain anymore, dude. I don't even know what you're trying to
not
argue,
smart
where you're
enough
coming
to
from. You don't
understand
even
my
know
brain.
you don't even know your own position.
Andrew, because
You're so
he's
caught up
trying
in
to
your own
lecture you.
bipolarness and
He's trying to
depression.
give you a
I don't
free
expect you to
lesson.
understand my
Wait,
brain.
no, hold on.
Thanks,
Hold on.
Rainy.
Can I say something, John, real quick?
John, wait. If you want to have your own lessons, go down below. Maybe they can join you. Calm
Hold
down.
on. John, we're so
Do
used
what?
to having John. So the
Yeah.
way that typically we have discussions is one person will hold one position on a topic. Let's say the topic is political ideology. So one person will be a Republican, one person will be a Democrat, and they'll discuss the virtues or flaws within each other, right? And we can have that discussion to say Democrats are better because of X, Y, and Z. Democrats are not better because of A, B, and C, right? But I don't know what you're doing with postmodernism that we're able to engage with you, right? You haven't offered.
Thank you, Concrete.
One second.
Giving you a lecture.
All right, let him finish. Let him finish. Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Concrete, are you done?
I think I was just gonna say. I don't even know. I forgot where I was going.
Okay, whatever.
You were saying there's nothing in postmodernism that
No. He was speaking to. We don't know what the fuck John is talking about. What we're supposed to be engaging. It's hard to even wrap our heads around it to know if there's an even opposing side. Is this a lecture? Is this like some kind of like Discord TED talk? Right? I agree with everything that Concrete said. Everything.
Once again, I came in a room asking what you guys know about postmodernism.
There he goes. He's going to start over again. It's just resetting.
Well, why? Listen, I think you should just stay out of the dialogue here.
But John, it's like I brought up the philosophy of science, and the statements that I gave you are based on the works of Karl Popper. Karl Popper is a postmodernist philosopher.
I don't know enough about him yet. I haven't got to him. He sounds so familiar. I've heard him in a circle.
And it's why when you look at the principles of postmodernism and you look at what it says about science, the description and explanatory statements of scientists and historians can, in principle, be objectively true or false. Not saying they are objectively true or false. The postmodern denial of this viewpoint, which follows from a rejection of the objective, natural reality, is sometimes expressed by saying there is no such thing as truth. So that's also part of postmodernist philosophy. So I don't know where the fuck you are coming from your view of it, but I appreciate that you have one and you don't have to repeat it again if you don't feel it's necessary. So I don't feel I need more education.
Well, maybe you can coin it. I mean, I hope I don't confuse or muddy the waters even more, but maybe, obviously, people are going to pick up on these postmodernist philosophers and their ideas, and I think
like René Descartes.
Well, they can misuse the like, for example, like how would I put it?
Like Voltaire.
Well, there's like a Stephen Hicks. He coins it the nihilist approach.
What about Jacques Derrida,
for example?
Come on, you're just trying to like. He obviously doesn't know these people, right? I mean, let's not do this.
So
let's not do quiz show. Let's not do quiz show.
I just don't understand why he's making the claim that he's some sort of expert on postmodernism where he obviously hasn't. And I haven't read most of the works of the people that I've just mentioned. I read a bit of Descartes, read some.
I'm not an expert.
You know,
does it make you feel better? I'll just retract that. I'm not an expert. I've only claimed that I know more about it than anyone in the server, unfortunately.
You want to still say that?
I think it would be more accurate to say that he has a Petersonian understanding of postmodernism.
All right.
I'm not trying to be insulting there. I'm saying
actually,
that.
I think that is a fantastic expression.
Okay. Maybe it would be helpful if we were able to try and distill the TED Talk into some sort of position, some succinct position. Let's start from the top.
Oh, these aren't TED Talks. These are like fucking 3, 4, 2-hour long lectures that you have to.
Okay, let me start from the top. Postmodern.
No,
dude.
Let me start by answering.
Jesus. Oh my God. Look,
I think
you're gonna be muted.
Ask me what substance I have.
I'm trying to help you, John. Start from the top. We're not gonna just listen to a stream of consciousness, okay? So the first question is, John, in regards to your position about postmodernism. Number one, John think postmodernism bad? Question mark. You can't even answer that?
I think that it can be bad.
Okay, you think it can be bad.
Just for simplicity's sake, though, I'm going to say yes.
And sometimes it's good.
It's good if you're just wanting to exercise a way of thinking. Like if you think it's fun. If you think it's fun to like if you engage in deconstructionist thinking and certain things like that, and you do it in a way that doesn't harm you or anyone around you.
Okay, so
then I guess
we can just set aside all the philosophers and people you're appealing to and like the Enlightenment, because really when it comes to present day, what you mean by postmodernist thinking is one, deconstructionist thinking, right? And sort of leftist libtard thinking, and like where people think that there's X numbers of genders and stuff like that, right?
Well, it's a certain, when you say something like postmodernist thinking, I think what you should do is paint a picture of the psychology here.
Yeah, leftist libtards, right? Just just say it, right? There's nothing wrong with it. You think that people,
like I said before, the person who coined the term,
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Postmodernism, they describe.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'm talking about just how we're going to use it today.
That you should take here.
No, it's not. Look. Give me an example.
So that person's wrong.
Wrong about what? What they defined it a long time ago? Who cares?
I do, because you don't understand it apparently.
You don't think leftist libtards, when they say that there's like 100 genders and they
square one.
You don't think leftist libtards, when they deconstruct gender and say that there's 100 different genders, is that not what you think is postmodernist thinking?
No, I don't mention libtards when I discuss postmodernism.
Call it whatever you want. The people that do that.
I'm going to call it. I'm going to describe it in a way that is appropriate. Like
do you think that behavior is leftist? Do you think that behavior is postmodernist thinking?
Leftist behavior is postmodernist thinking?
Eject the words leftist libtard. Just the scenario that I described to you, and the person that says there's 100 genders and they just deconstruct gender, do you think that is postmodernist thinking, yes or no?
I think when you say, is it postmodernist thinking, that's a little weird. I would say that I would be comfortable saying that they may have used certain aspects of deconstruction to conclude those ideas. I'd be willing to.
Okay, so we got the deconstruction. Okay, so my next question is, give me. And I am not going. No, you are not driving the ship. You're not steering the rudder. I am, okay? You steering the rudder has just going around in circles and ending up on a deserted island. We're not doing that. Listen to me. The second question is, I want you to give me a present day, real world example of postmodernist thinking. Like I tried with my example of people thinking that there are 100 different genders, right? Now it's your turn, so we can get on the same page.
Did you mute me just now?
Yes.
That's really unfair of you.
You never stop over.
And that's done.
What?
All right, let's just please, guys. I mean, Concrete. That's helpful. I understand. Andricus, please. You instigate him more than anything, and it kind of has the negative impact I think you want.
No problem.
John, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm gonna let you have it your way. I'm not gonna leave like I usually do, because usually I just leave. But I'm gonna let you have your way. Your little interrogation here. I'll answer all your fucking questions. But after that's done, I want to go right back to square one and get you to acknowledge the phrase incredulity towards meta-narratives. I want you to think about that, what it means. So what is it you want me to answer right now at the moment?
Oh my god, dude. I mean, like... All right, here's... Concrete, do you remember what the question was?
No.
Okay. John, the task for you...
was...
I
remember.
The task for you...
I remember. You want me to give you an example? I remember now.
No. Listen, I'll just do it again. I'll just do it. Jesus Christ, man. Look, I'll just do it again. The task to you is to give me a real world example of postmodernist thinking. I tried with my example about gender. You rejected that. You said it was partially right. So give me one that is 100% right.
I know you're not gonna like this, but that's an unfair question. And I promise you, anyone who knows anything about postmodernism, they would answer that question the same way I did, because it's the wrong way to phrase that question. Like, I'm gonna just help you out a little bit. I can answer this. I could explain to you ideas. I give you examples of ideas of people and their behavior that I think, and I can argue that I think that type of behavior is only possible because of some of these postmodern ideas. So in other words, I can draw a direct link to the ideas themselves, but I'm not comfortable with saying postmodernism means that, because you're going to get so much fucking pushback.
No, you literally just said I have examples of these. That's what I'm asking you.
Well, let's say I could.
Guy walks into a store. He orders a Big Mac. The guy says, "Well, what is a Big Mac really? And he does the thesis of Big Macs. Is that postmodernism?" That's what I'm asking you for.
I tell you this, there may be a lot of irony in what I'm about to tell you, a lot of it, and for obvious reasons. But a good example of someone who's influenced by these ideas would be some of the most privileged people among us. So let's take we could take Jack, for example. Jack's like this trust fund baby who's never worked.
Okay, Concrete. I'm going to appeal to you as someone who's even sympathetic to John, right? I think I've asked a very fair question, Concrete, right? Now he's now talking about Jack and talking about him being a trust fund baby and stuff like that. What do I need to do to understand? I'm trying really hard to understand his position, right? He's saying he observes these things, this postmodernistic thinking. He says it's a problem current day, yet he can't give me one example where he says, see, this is what I'm talking about. A person does X, Y, Z. That's all I want. Do you think that's a fair thing to ask for?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe it's just me. Maybe you can talk to John. Would you be willing to try your hand and try to get it out of him?
Well, what I would suggest is, at some point it clicked for him, right? So there was a time when John didn't understand postmodernism or understand the problem with postmodernism. Then either a book, a video, a lecture, something made it click for him, and now he's become a preacher, right? He's now proselytizing that which he now believes and understands. So all he has to do is tell us which, work fucking convinced him and opened his eyes. Let us read it, and then hopefully we'll have the same effect, or at least be on the same page.
That's a good question. John, what was the book, work, video, whatever that convinced you so we can watch it?
The conversation's over. You've been treating me unfairly throughout the entire dialogue. Muting me left and right, not letting me finish a thought, crying about not understanding what I'm saying. The conversation's over. If we get a heavyweight in here, we can continue. If you get JC, Jack, or someone who knows what they're talking about, we can continue.
John, it's not even gaslighting. It's real serious. I mean, want to understand you, bro. It's not that it's just we're having a difficulty doing it. Just tell us.
Oh no, I have
what
no problem
works.
answering your question. I can tell you where I get my information from. That's no problem. But
Wait,
talking to
so
Thomas
is
about
it
this is a
multiple
fruitless
pieces?
endeavor. You guys are
Wait,
more
John,
annoyed about the topic than interested in it, I think.
John,
But
just stay focused. Stay focused. Is it multiple pieces that you yourself piece together with this ultimate understanding, or was it one work that showed you exactly what you're talking about now?
well, yeah, like to come to the understanding that I have. Hold on, I got a message. But my understanding comes from an observation and analysis of many factors, historical factors, what thinkers were thinking at the time, things like that. But it's who I get my information from is a guy. It's been many people because many people have talked about it, but the main guy would be Stephen Hicks. He has a book called Understanding Postmodernism. He has many lectures online that I would encourage all of you to get into. I mean, honestly, I think that if you guys were to sit down and watch some of these lectures and understand some of these ideas, you would have your eureka moments. You would be like, holy fuck, Jesus Christ, this is what everyone's been talking
Well,
about.
there it is.
Like Jordan
You
Peterson,
got
Stephen Hicks, all these intellectuals.
Got it. I'm gonna look it up on Amazon. What's the book? Sorry.
You're roboting, Concrete.
What's the name of the book?
All right, so Stephen Hicks.
Understanding
Stephen Hicks.
Postmodernism by Stephen Hicks.
Hi,
The
Helena,
other
how's
one-
it going?
The other
Hey.
one you can look at, by the
A
way,
more
is
civilized voice is refreshing.
so the other person you could look at is Jean-François Lyotard.
I don't understand why it's so hard to just point out. I mean, this guy's a pragmatist, supposedly, right? Point out an instance of postmodernistic thinking.
I literally tried to, but you got triggered and muted me, and then told Concrete you don't understand what I'm
You
saying.
started talking about Jack.
Because Jack is influenced by postmodernist thinking.
What does that have to do with you giving me an example of postmodernist thinking?
I even qualified it because I knew you would feel some type of way about me bringing up someone who you thought was the smartest in the community and shitting on him, right? I said there's going to be a lot of irony here, right? And the reason why I said there's going to be a lot of irony here is because I was about to shit all over who you guys thought was the smartest person around.
Yeah, what's the use of that, Johnson? That's useless.
I'm trying to give you an
Why
example
don't
of the
you
type of
just
people who would be influenced
explain
by these ideas, right? It's privilege.
what it is about Jack that you
Yeah.
think is postmodern? Just give an example, even if it's Jack. What is it about Jack that you think reflects postmodern thinking?
Okay, I'm going to try to be specific here. One time I talked to Jack, and it was clear that I deemed him dishonest in the dialogue. I told him he was dishonest. We were having a conversation about hierarchies and whether or not they are like a primitive part of existence, right? In other words, like, would we even entertain an idea that there are any life forms that evolve outside of a hierarchy? Because, long story short, there is a consensus amongst the thinkers that hierarchies are fundamental, right? That all around us, life evolves into hierarchical structures. This is just a common understanding. No one questions it. But Jack, he invokes the postmodernist skepticism of relativism and deconstruction, and in a way that he, just for the most part, for simplicity's sake, he invokes extreme skepticism on these ideas.
Yeah, it's about not accepting the traditional narrative as laid down by
that would be the
everybody.
postmodernist coming out of him. And keep in mind, I think he's a Marxist, correct?
Yeah, he's
Jack
a Marxist.
Is a Marxist, right? Right.
Yeah.
So Jack is the type of person we would expect to have certain tendencies and ideas towards the Western world or capitalism, right? He's going to have a certain kind of disdain for that. So he is the type, in other words, Jack is the perfect fucking subject to fall victim to this extreme anti-capitalist, relativistic, dishonest framework in which we try to elaborate on in postmodern thinking. Like, keep in mind, we've claimed that the postmodernists are hypocrites, right? They go around undermining everyone's ideas while simultaneously acting like realists in some sense, or absolutists. Because, Jack's going to go around telling you you're wrong about every fucking thing. Telling you that the consensus is wrong, invoking extreme skepticism while simultaneously demonizing you and making truth claims, right? It's just fucking absurdity. Like, these people, they fucking literally invoke relativism and absolutism at the same time. It's so fucking annoying.
Wow,
But
John,
with my interactions with Jack, I can tell you right now that he's one of the people we could give an example of that is influenced by these
But
ideas.
that wasn't the question.
Yeah, so I heard an example in there. He questions the assumption that hierarchies are a necessary fact of
No,
nature.
not necessary. It's a fundamental part of our existence. Everyone knows this. The point
By
I'm trying to
necessary, I
make,
mean couldn't have been otherwise.
let me make it more clearer. Postmodernist thinkers, they go around deconstructing ideas and invoking extreme skepticism when it's convenient for them, and when it's not convenient for them, they'll just invoke absolutism or something.
Well, no, that's a different
exactly what
thing
Jack
than
did.
explaining postmodernist thinking. So, I can see the postmodernist thinking aspect in questioning the assumption that there's a necessary feature of nature involves hierarchy. And by necessary, I mean couldn't have been otherwise. I don't mean required or some any other thing other than couldn't have been otherwise. But as far as like the hypocritical and all the sort of negative things you're saying, I don't think that's part and parcel of postmodernism. Like that they're hypocritical, dishonest. What else did you say?
That's true, Helena. That's what we see when we look at them. Like
but that's not part of the postmodernism, right? That's your opinion.
Okay, so let me just rephrase it in a way that you would like. We have activist groups practicing postmodernism in an inappropriate way. Is that
right? Give me an example of that. That's what I'm asking for.
Like invoking extreme skepticism when convenient, and in the next sentence, in the next breath, invoking absolutism. That's the type of behavior you would be dealing with the postmodernist thinking.
Yes, give me an example.
Let's think of an activist group that does that.
We could take the people who are
Christian
advocating for
church.
We can talk about people advocating for non-binary and sexes, all that bullshit, right? They're just rejecting the current understanding of biology and shit. Some of them.
Wait. This was my example, which you said wasn't. This was hold on a second. This was my example that you said wasn't an example. Why are you now using my example, which you said wasn't an example, when we asked you give us an example?
I told you the way you asked the question is inappropriate, and anyone would tell you that you should rephrase it. And I rephrase it for you. I said what I'm comfortable doing is elaborating on some of the ideas that could only be concluded with the help of some of the postmodern ideas.
Okay.
Like, for example, the non-binary conclusions they make.
So you're picking out things that you don't like that have been influenced by postmodernism. I can see where you think that the rejection of an assumption that it's just a necessary fact that sex is binary could be an example, because it involves rejections of built-in traditional assumptions from the Enlightenment. But there are also positive. Let me just finish. There are also positive aspects of the influence of postmodernism. For example, Jordan Peterson and his discussion about narrative and how it influences culture. That's postmodernistic too. So you wouldn't want to reject postmodernism because you don't like some of its effects.
That's absolutely what I want to do.
Well, then you should stop talking about meta-narratives and how story is an influence in culture and what is considered to be true based on traditional, stories passed down from time to time.
I don't know if you've heard me say this, but I've said it quite a few times. I don't take issue with postmodernism in of itself. I just hate the activist groups in which it produces.
Okay, so it's not actually a criticism of postmodernism.
Listen, this is very vital when trying to understand where I'm coming from. My only interest here is the psychology behind it all. I want to know the influence behind the ideas, because I already have an understanding that ideas are very influential. So that's all I'm interested in here. I want to psychoanalyze the people who existed during the Enlightenment. I want to understand the origins of these ideas. And very importantly, I want to understand what type of people are most susceptible to these ideas. And I think it's clear that if you get into postmodernism, you understand that those people were the Marxists. It was the Marxists. This is why I mentioned Jack. This is why I try to say Jack is actually the perfect fucking example here. He is literally a fucking Marxist. He is
Okay,
the type of
what
person we could
is
see having
postmodern?
disdain for the Western world, right? And
What is
he'd be anti-capitalist, for example.
what about Marxism is postmodernist influenced? Merely the skepticism that capitalism is
Well, I
sustainable?
don't know if you've heard this uh comparison. That's the word I'm looking for. I don't know if you've heard this comparison, but to kind of show you just how strikingly similar it can be. Um, and just as a qualifier, I understand that postmodernism and Marxism, like for example, postmodern neo-Marxism, that is a complete contradiction. They're not, they're exclusive. Like for example, Marxism would be considered a meta-narrative. Postmodernism, to some degree, is a rejection of meta-narratives, or at least an unwillingness to accept them. So those things are damn near opposite. But the thing is, so for example, let me just continue with my example I was going to give you. Uh, Marxists used to go around crying and getting their morals off and their endorphins released by attacking capitalists and claiming that it was the rich versus the poor, that the rich were oppressing the poor. That was the narrative. Now, when Marxism and communism failed miserably, in other words, when the facts and logic were against the Marxists, they shifted their strategy to what we call postmodernism and the whole deconstructionist and all that list of things. But for example, the postmodernists would claim something like it's oppressor versus oppressee, rather than what the Marxists do, which is very similar. They just say that it's a higher economic class oppressing lower economic classes. So you could just see how amazingly similar their narratives can run. So what I would love for more people to understand is why these Marxists made that transition, right? Why they started rejecting logic and things like that, became postmodernist thinkers. And the
Well,
reason is, oh, go ahead.
there's an assumption there that that happened, and I think that that hasn't been established. I don't think
Massive assumption.
Marxists did this. Like, oh, let's get together. Oh, look, communism failed, so let's switch to something else. I know. Let's
Well, I
all
can give you examples
advocate
telling.
for non-binary sex. I mean, that
Do you
didn't
remember?
happen.
Well, do you remember the footage of the tanks running over the protesters?
Which one?
In
Talking about Tiananmen
Tiananmen
Square?
Square? Yeah, I
Yeah,
remember.
I can't remember exactly. Listen, I'm gonna wreck this, and I'm gonna need you guys to help me out in terms
Tiananmen
of
Square. Yeah, we do remember.
But long story short, from my understanding, we had communist countries existing at the time. So the Marxists would look at these countries as beacons of hope. But so we had a country. I can't remember exactly. I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly what country it was, but there was a
China.
country that was a communist country, and it was having a very hard time. And I think the reason is because the kids in the society, they wanted jobs when they graduated, and they just wasn't there because they were practicing communism. Everyone was going broke. No one could get a fucking job.
I think he's talking about the
So
Czech Spring.
there were these crazy protests going on. So what they did, the people in charge of that country, they panicked and they called Big Brother. You know, they called the Soviet Union.
He's talking about the
And
Czech Spring.
they sent in the tanks,
Like
right?
in
And
Prague.
Yeah.
yes, this was a very pivotal moment in history because, like Stephen Hicks explains, this was the first time that Western technology, or this like tanks, for example, this type of technology was on display for the world to see. It was no longer CIA propaganda, right? Like it was real. People saw it with their own eyes. And this is just a fancy way of saying this is very important information that once people saw the monstrosity, I can't even say the word right, monstrosities, I think it is, the evil doings and that was coming out of these communist countries, this was a major blow to the Marxist movement. Because keep in mind that these are supposed to be the most moral and ethical places on earth. This is what the Marxists were claiming at the time, right? And they also made other claims that the rich would get richer and smaller, and eventually all the poor would take over because there's too many poor, and that didn't happen. So their ideas were they just weren't coming to light. You know what I mean? It was failing miserably. And around that time, we did reach a place where it was like morally reprehensible to consider yourself a Marxist because we had so much, like the logic was on the side of capitalism. The facts and the logic were against Marxism and on the side of capitalism. So this is a very pivotal moment in all of your thinking at the moment. Now you ask yourself the question, where did these really intelligent 20-something, 30-something-year-olds do? Where did they go from here? If you answer that question, you get into the postmodernist rabbit hole.
Yeah. The problem is your grasp of history is a bit off.
Also,
Did I
none of
run
that
Helena?
really made any. None of that really made it.
You cut out, but I think you said none of that made any sense.
No, it didn't.
You cut out again. Oh,
Gibberish.
I heard gibberish. Helena, did Helena leave? I mean, goddamn. That's
No, I'm
rude.
here.
Did I lose you already?
Calm yourself, dude. Seriously, calm yourself.
Well, I don't like talking to you.
Well, I don't want to hear
just
you
pretend I'm not
insulting
here.
Helena. Knock it off.
You
No,
have I
Helena,
haven't
you should have been listening to
you
me.
haven't
These
lost.
are ideas that
What
you would
makes you
love
think?
to understand.
Jesus Christ.
I don't understand why you think I wasn't listening. So the thing is, John, it seems like why don't you take the next step? So you have a basic idea.
No,
You
before
think
we
that
do all this,
postmodernism.
tell me
Oh,
what part of
shut
friendship is
up, John.
stupid, Helena.
Shut up.
Helena,
ahead,
I'm
Helena.
interested in you disagreeing with anything I just said, if at all anything.
Yeah, I think I'm going to disagree, but I think I'm
But
understanding
first
the
start with what I
your
said was wrong.
basic idea.
Like you said this, John, and that was wrong.
You said that the young people who were involved in those uprisings turned to postmodernism, and that has been sort of the beginnings of something bad.
It wasn't even necessarily young people, Helena. I think it was like older. Like
You
I
said
said
20-somethings.
30-something. Like just to be clear, Helena, I think that there's like a couple generations of postmodernist thinkers. So we are dealing with a situation in which postmodern thinkers became academics and then trained the next generation of postmodern thinkers. Like this is something that took place.
With the Czech Spring.
Well, the reason why I mentioned the Czech Spring is because at that point, that's when it started becoming socially reprehensible to be considered a Marxist, and that's when it started like.
No.
And the reason why I say that is because, like I said before, these Marxists were claiming that these communist countries were the most moral and best countries on earth, and for the first time, we got to see on TV that that was just wrong. That really terrible things are happening in these countries.
Didn't the Soviets do a pretty good suppression in Hungary in the 50s
People were
as well?
basically starting to see that when they put the Berlin Wall up, which came before the Czech Spring.
So I beg you all to ask yourselves the question: if you're an intelligent 20-something to 30-something-year-old Marxist, a very intelligent one, and how would you respond to all of this? How would you respond to the evidence and logic that capitalism is lifting tremendous amounts of people out of poverty, for example?
Well, we don't see that now, do we?
Yeah, it also puts a lot of people in
Are
poverty.
any of you able to answer the question? Because if not, we can just move on.
I just did.
Capitalism also, yes, capitalism can lift people out of poverty. It can also put people into poverty. And under communism, there isn't really poverty because there's no money, right?
You're missing the point. I'm just trying to.
No, he's not.
I'm just trying to garner my patience. Hold on.
Jesus.
I'm going to convert to Christianity
so,
and
Tom,
hope that God protects me
just
from
to
being rich like
backtrack a little bit. My goal here is to, for example, I was trying to explain that Marxists, they considered their Marxism a scientific theory, for lack of better words. They tried to separate themselves from socialists, for example, because the socialists had this reputation of being utopians, this fantasy people, and the Marxists wanted to separate themselves from that, so they made it very clear that they were not just merely socialists, they were actually scientists in some sense, because their Marxism made predictions, just like the scientific method would. So that's true. These people made predictions that ended up being completely false. The predictions, like for example, if we have evidence that capitalism lifted tremendous amounts of people out of poverty, understand, Tom, that does shit in the face of Marxists.
Why? What prediction does that? What
kind of on point here?
What prediction does that violate?
The Marxists made claims that the rich there would be a smaller amount of rich people, and there would be increasing amount of poor people until it all collapsed in on itself. And that's just not what happened. What ended up happening was more and more people became rich.
Yeah, relative to more and more people becoming poor.
Yeah, there's John.
Record numbers of Steven Pinker wrote a fucking book about this, guys. Come
Oh,
on.
big
We all
fucking
know that
deal. I wrote a
capitalism
book
did a
too.
lot of good for us.
I wrote a book too. Big deal. It doesn't
I'm
mean just
not
because you
going
write
to
a
sit
fucking
here
book
and
that the
entertain you guys on
sun
this
shines
extreme
through your
skepticism
asshole.
towards the good capitalism has done.
So the question I would ask, which I think is pertinent to the point here, does that mean that the system, and I'm not a communist, by the way, does that mean that the system of communism was at fault, or was it the corruption of the people in the system at fault?
Well, I think the crushing, just to be clear, I think the crushing blow for the communist ideology, or at least the ideology of equality of outcome, I think the crushing blow was hierarchies. That's actually, there's a lot of irony there. That's actually the conversation I had with Jack, a Marxist who invoked extreme skepticism when I mentioned hierarchies.
Why do I get the feeling he didn't invoke extreme
promise you this is
Sorry,
exactly how it went.
You're not actually addressing the question that I put, John. Sorry.
Oh, okay, my bad. Go ahead. Ask it again, please.
So the question I asked is, does that demonstrate that the system was wrong, or does that demonstrate the fact that the corruption within the system was at fault? So was it the system itself that was the problem, or was it the participants in the system?
Communism or Marxism? Right? That's what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
I would say it's a mixture of both. Like that's why I tried to say I think there's problems within the doctrine itself of communism. I tried to point it out. It was hierarchies. For example, I mean I don't want to go into it.
Every political system that we have inherently has hierarchy. You know, even in a co-op, there is normally a form of hierarchy.
Well, I think the main point is, and I may be wrong, but I think a lot of these communists, they piss me off because, especially the intelligent ones like Jack.
No,
like
the system, not the individuals. We're talking about the system, not the individuals. So the question at hand is the problem systemic, right? Or can the system be demonstrated to be problematic, or is it the participants?
I think it's both. I think that there's problems.
You've mentioned hierarchy. Sorry, I just want to finish my point very, very quickly. Sorry, John, because I just want to be clear. You've mentioned hierarchy, and hierarchy is something common to all political systems. So if that's a fault, that will be a common fault to all systems. Now carry on.
Yeah, I think it's both. To answer your question, I think it's a mixture of both in the sense that I think there's problems with communism. I mentioned hierarchies and things like that. And that there is also problems with the psyche, what I'm interested in. I think that there are certain people who are more susceptible based off their psyche, based off their characteristics. They're more susceptible to these ideas.
That's the individual, not the system.
It's both. Clear.
No, it's not. It's not, because what you said, it's hierarchies. Great, hierarchies are common across all political systems. We kind of haven't argued that point, so I'm assuming you accept it.
No, I would claim the communist advocate would reject hierarchies.
Conceptually or within communism?
It's a blatant contradiction. They can't have both, so they just have to dismiss hierarchies, like what Jack did, for example, right?
Jack doesn't dismiss hierarchies altogether.
Helena, he invoked extreme skepticism when it came up and said that there could be a society without hierarchies.
Yeah.
No one fucking would ever entertain that idea without some kind of motive.
Why not?
Because it's a consensus. Dude.
Are you saying it's logically impossible? It's logically impossible?
I'm saying that if you work from an epistemology off of probability and likelihood, it is the last thing you would subscribe to.
All right, so you're saying it's not logically impossible.
Yeah, but what does that get you by acknowledging that?
Well, that means that it's possible. By your own lights. So it's not extreme skepticism.
So I have no problem. I have no problem.
So you're calling you're pointing at Jack and saying
No.
extreme skepticism to the thing that I also think is possible.
No, listen, I hate having to walk you through these things, man, but I'll do it again, right? Like, we have.
You said you think it's possible, so how could it be extreme skepticism? If that's the case, then you're an extreme skeptic.
God, you are such a bad thinker, really bad thinker. But so we could just now you're just confusing me. Can you backtrack a little bit so I can remember? Because you're just fucking every time I go to respond, you just fucking you're bringing up something.
You'd lay off the fucking weed.
You start every single fucking response with a condescension, John. You idiot. You see, I left it to the end.
All right. I know, guys. Just this is not gonna help. I'm telling you, it's gonna devolve even further.
I'm sorry. I will withdraw that. Try and be civil, please.
You say
Yeah,
that.
So Tom, here. Here's where you're going wrong. Here's where you're getting it wrong. I'm okay with acknowledging it's possible, I guess.
Well, it's not. What do you mean? You guess? It's by you possible. You guess. You mean it's possible, right?
Yeah, but unfortunately, I think that people like you use this type of thinking the wrong way. Like, for example, I could say that it's possible the universe was created last Sunday. I could say that you have no argument against that idea, but I don't think it gets you anything, right? Long story short, Jack made that claim, but the real thing he has to contend with is the fact that we have no reason to believe that. Sure, it's possible, but the key thing here is we absolutely have no fucking reason to believe that unless you're heavily ideologically motivated, and that would be my claim.
We have no idea to believe what.
Jack is a smart guy. There's no reason why Jack should be, being skeptical.
We have no idea. We have no reason to believe what.
We have no reason to believe that there are any societies out there of people who are living outside of a hierarchy.
Well,
just
don't
make the claim even more broader, right? There's no reason to believe that any life form has ever evolved outside of a hierarchical structure.
Wow, that's weird.
It's not weird. This is just this is like a consensus. This is an understanding that
Don't
people have.
do you think that hierarchies are based on like consciousness? You think life forms without consciousness are like consciously ordering societal structures?
Me and you don't share. You can't bring up words like consciousness whenever I'm like a panpsychist, for example. I think the universe behaves as if it is conscious. These are all ideas I'm not willing to walk you through.
So rocks have hierarchies?
No.
I'm gonna have to say, on an abstract, foolish, I can't prove it way. I kind of agree with John on the consciousness, the universe thing, but that's my own particular weirdities.
Yeah, but John, don't you think like if communism is supposed to be a society without hierarchies, don't you think a defeater to that is if like somebody's taller than another guy, and you're like, oh, hierarchy, communism defeated?
Well, I think you would. Well, I would grant them charity. So I would say this isn't good enough. That example, I would say, listen, you have to show why this isn't going to work, why this communist state isn't going to work, right? And the thing you just mentioned, I don't think that's good enough. But there is.
Wait, is that an example of a hierarchy? Yes or no?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. There is clearly a hierarchy of height.
And do you think that the communist thinks that communism means no hierarchies?
I think the communists mean classless, stateless society, right? Isn't that their claim?
Just answer the question.
Well, the thing that I have to clarify here is when they say classes, I consider like hierarchy synonymous with classes, right? Like there are classes of height, there are different classes of intelligence. This would be synonymous with saying there are different hierarchies of height and different hierarchies of intelligence.
So you think that class and hierarchy are synonymous. And so when the communist, if that's the case, when the communist says there are no classes, you think that there are no hierarchies or people being a different height, one person being taller than another one would be a defeater to communism.
No, I said that wouldn't be good enough because that would just be like.
But what that would be good enough as how you laid it out.
Like, look at it this way: if the communist is claiming and advocating for a classless, stateless society where everyone is equal, and there's this keyword here, equality of outcome. Let's just imagine that society for a second, and if you do that, then you run into hierarchies immediately as being a problem here. I talked about the Beta Cuck uprising. That's a perfect example on how things could go completely wrong really fast, and the culprit would be these hierarchies. Like maybe it's a looks hierarchy, right? Like maybe, like for example, some people look better than others. I don't know. Are you guys even familiar with the whole Beta Cuck uprising argument? Because it just shits.
Oh my god, dude.
It has to do with what we're talking about.
So
So long story short, if you, because you guys haven't done it, I asked you guys to try to think about it. But so if you're contemplating a communist society, no classes, right? And you have equality of outcome. You would immediately
No, you
fall
get
into
equality of
fundamental
opportunity in
hierarchies of
communism.
looks, right?
You don't get equality of outcome in communism. You get equality of opportunity. I mean, Lenin was famous for saying, let him who works succeed, let him who does not work fail. So there's already a hierarchy in that, which is the hierarchy is: are you prepared to work for the common good, or are you not? If you're not part of the society.
Well, just to be clear, I disagree with the first thing you said. Yeah, the first sentence out of your mouth, I disagree with. I think that most communists, I think most conservatives, I think most people are for equality of opportunity, right? And I think it's unfair for you to say,
that's same as all traditional liberals are. In fact, traditional liberalism is where that phrase comes from, because it's by John Locke.
So you don't think that Marxists and communists have anything to do with equality of outcome?
No, they try and make more of an even base, but you still got to participate. If you're a lazy worker, you're not of value to the society, and the society is what counts. It's the collectivization view as opposed to the individualistic view, espoused by people like John Locke.
I mean, if you're saying that under communist society we put someone who's better looking than his peers in the society and he gets more women, that's somehow you're saying that's a defeater to communism?
Well, it's a defeater for the idea of equality of outcome. And I disagree with this guy. I think that the communists and the Marxists, they were advocating for equality of outcome in their utopia.
They don't. Where did they say it's a utopia?
Well, they might not use the word utopia, but goddamn, you can act like you got some fucking common sense here, right? You know what I'm talking about. These people were advocating for a classless, stateless society where everyone was equal. There was no one had more money than someone else type shit.
There is no money. There can't be more money.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, when they talk about getting rid of the hierarchy in communism, isn't that to do with the economic
Let me just paint the picture
hierarchy, which
Let me
is
just
why
paint
you're...
Beta
I
Cuck
finish my
uprising
point,
picture.
John, I'm just trying to finish a point. Which was the whole point of that is by removing... That's right. Okay, yeah, I'm getting back to it now. So by removing the money from the system, you're taking out the financial hierarchy that exists between the classes, because, Bob over there can go and buy a Beamer. I can only afford a bicycle with one wheel. It's that's the equality they're talking about. Is the fact that there is no, property is owned by the state. Everybody's a member of the state. Everybody gets to participate with the state. If you don't participate with the state, you're not part of the state. So I'm not. I think we're talking about two very different. I mean, I'm no expert on this topic, and I'm sure there are people here that understand communism.
Well, I tried to clarify. I'm equivocating on some of their teachings. Like if they claim they want a classless society, I'm equating that to they're saying they want a society without the burdens of the hierarchies.
Yeah, well, I'm a classical pagan, and you know there are a lot of pagan LARPers. Does that mean that they represent my views, or do they have their own views?
Well,
So
let
rather
me do
than
this.
try and bundle everything up into one big basket that you can conveniently label and then pontificate on, why don't you be specific in your examples? Then maybe you'll be able to communicate in an effective manner.
Yeah, we're gonna try right now. So I'm gonna go back to that example I was trying to put forth to help you guys understand here what I'm talking about. So I call it the Beta Cuck uprising, right? So if we try to do what these communists and these Marxists want, as soon as we implement this society, I would claim that we would immediately fall prey to more fundamental hierarchies that were suppressed in the capitalist society. To give you an example, in a capitalist society, you can be fat, you can be unfit, and you can be ugly, and still get a good fit mate, reproduce well, because of things like maybe you're really smart, maybe you're really rich, right? This is a phenomenon this is not a normal phenomenon. It's not normal for a really ugly dude to be getting a really sexy ass girl pregnant and shit like that. These things are only possible because of some of the capitalistic characteristics, right? Like in these hierarchies, right? Like some of these
All
ugly
that
fat
shit was
dudes that
happening
come
way
from
before
these
capitalism.
states.
Yeah, that's human. That's humanity for all of history. What are you talking about?
I'm so glad you're admitting this, because this is what the Marxists and the communists are saying we can get rid of.
Sorry, I've never read a passage by Lenin that said anything like that.
We can get rid of
join communism, get a hot chick.
We can get rid of ugly people having sex with attractive people? Where is that in the Communist Manifesto?
Oh my god.
Well, just to be clear, we're not on the same page. At least me and the guy with the accent, because I do think that they did preach equality of outcome. You
What
don't
is
think
it?
that's the thing.
You
have
think
a clear disagreement here.
like in some sort of utopian sense? Like one guy's job in communism is to like make shoes, and another guy's is to be a doctor. That's like not equality of outcome.
No, like
What does equality of outcome mean to you?
equality of outcome is like no one is more rich than anyone else. We can't, like, no one has more wealth than someone else, for example.
Yeah, because there's no money in communism, so that holds true. We're agreed
like, for
so
example,
far.
there are different forms of currency. Just because you get rid of one type of currency doesn't mean you're going to get rid of things like social currency. This is where we get into things like, yes, there are some people who look better than others, and the way biologists and the way really smart people evaluate it, they think that the way we are naturally is that most of like this is how it would end up happening. A small minority of the best looking, most fit males would mate and have a majority of the women. And there would be a majority of men who don't get to reproduce very much and would become very miserable and start lashing out.
John, can I ask a serious...
with communism?
I just want to actually ask a serious question
Well,
here.
this, just to
The
be clear,
more
this
and more we
process
talk
would
about
play out in the
this,
communist society,
like
right?
he
If
doesn't
you
hear
take
anything.
if you take the money out of it, what's going to happen to the fat guy, to the nerd? They're
Oh
not
my
gonna, they're gonna lose
Probably,
their hot wife, guy.
probably the same thing that's happening to all the incels in capitalism right now.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say what it sounds to me like is you seem to have a grudge that you can't get laid on a regular basis.
No, I just have an understanding of human nature, and that a majority of men would end up dating a majority of the women, and vice versa, and how this
So
would negatively impact us.
And in what world do you think where there is free choice that people do not choose a partner on, for mutually, that there is generally some choice? Some guy goes, fucking hell, I'm lucky, or some girl goes, I'm really lucky.
Don't
It's
kid
happy.
yourself.
Whatever.
Don't
How
kid yourself here.
How are you going to take that part of human nature, whether it's for avarice, whether it's for power or position, whether it's because they find someone attractive, whatever, there is still going to be that decision choice tree going on. All you're telling me is, why are you being mean to all the rich people who won't get laid under a system where they can't use their privilege and power to get laid?
Also, you just don't see that there's anything wrong with it. Like you just don't give a fuck.
No, I'm just trying to look at this objectively at the moment rather than emotionally, John.
Well, you don't seem to care about these fat guys and nerds who will no longer be able to.
Maybe I'm one of them.
These people exist under any system, though. Like, what are you?
Yeah, but it can't. These people cannot exist in a capitalist society. They can't exist. We actually see it all the time here.
I will put it really bluntly with you. It's why in every single society.
Hey, let the female talk for just a second, because you've been talking a lot more than she
has been a thing.
What would you say? Whoever that was?
I said in every society.
Not you,
throughout
the girl that tried to get a word or two out.
I don't really have much to say. Let him.
No, I'm done, Hagar. That was the statement I was just trying to bang out. If you'll
Well, I
pardon me.
don't really have much to say other than like, if your criticism is that, then you're criticizing other things in the process.
You're cutting out for me. Say that again.
You're criticizing other things in the.
I'm criticizing other things in the process. You cut out after that. Is that all you said?
John, I think women equality has affected the dating pool schematics.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. I'm just going to move on to what Sugar is saying.
John, I think gender equality has affected the schematic evolution of our population part dating wise than anything else, and you'd say that's a net positive, right?
I don't know. Like, I don't understand what you're saying. Would you say that again?
How do you not understand what I'm saying? Gender equality, women's rights, women's power in society has affected the dating pool and potential partners that they end up, ugly men end up with more than anything. Okay, astronomically so. How have you not addressed this in your theorizations?
By the way, communist society is way better at equalizing the roles of men and women. Just a FYI.
I mean, I'm interested in analyzing these with you, Sugar. It's interesting to me. Like, but
how the fuck have you not thought about this?
I think there's.
How have you sat here and about fat people's effect and socialism's effect, and not thought about how women equality has affected all of this?
Well, just to be clear, Sugar, I do want you to know that you're on thin ice, and that there's going to be a lot of pushback here from. Not me. Like I'm okay with talking about the hard to talk about subjects, but clearly
then talk
you
about
can see
it
how
and stop
a lot of
rolling
people
around.
are going to start demonizing you and basically claiming that you're going to start concluding that we should ban women's rights, or the Muslims got it all figured out by covering them up and treating them like property.
Not in this server, you're not.
So
John, why don't you try answering his question?
I'm arguing it's as clear as day that gender equality equals superior advanced societies.
Yeah.
Well, I do think that right now, psychologically speaking, the dating pool has been fucked, and women are more depressed than they ever were for social media reasons.
Now we're getting to the core issue.
Oh, maybe they could be depressed because they labor under capitalism.
John, who gives a shit about the women right now? We're talking about the men, all right, that are getting gypped out of their righteous evolutionary lay. Okay,
Gypped is racist. It's against the Romani people. Please don't use the word gypped.
Well, I think that I highly respect the relationship between man and woman. I think that it's a team relationship. We go perfect with one another. We're on the same team type of shit.
Excuse me, some of us are gay, so don't bother with that.
I'm just saying, you're not going to get a whole lot of sexism out of me. I respect the woman's role, but I am going to be honest about some of the negative aspects of some things. Like, for example, I'm open to entertaining the idea that thrusting women into the capitalist workforce really did hurt them physically and mentally, actually. I think that most women probably were happier falling in love and being taken care of, and just taking care of kids, shaping lives. That's the most important job anyone could ever have. So I'm not downplaying their role. I think they're amazing. They're the caretakers of the world. They give birth to the next generation. I can't stress it enough that I'm not being sexist here, right? But to be honest,
except that women should be barefoot
I do feel
and
really bad.
pregnant.
Just intuitively speaking, I think most people share this intuition with me. If you see,
they
imagine if you
No,
saw.
no, they do not. Modern society does not.
I don't even. I don't even want
Let me
kids.
get the
I find
intuition
kids
out there
obnoxious.
first. Let me get this intuition out there first, and then you say whether or not you agree with it or not. So I think that the intuition that I think most people would agree with is that if you see a drop dead gorgeous fucking woman, like a really beautiful woman, because really beautiful women are very powerful creatures. They have a lot of influence and whatnot. So this is sort of why it's so taboo. But if you see a really beautiful girl having to work, like let's say she's working a fucking retail job, she's just not doing very good. Like that is there's something wrong with that. And like any man, we
Wow,
see
this
this
is
happening all the
Christian
time.
Bale rape.
Now we're getting into the core of it, people.
Wow, this is American.
This is some simp type shit.
If you're
This
gonna,
is
if
some
you're
simp
gonna be
type
honest
shit.
about it, if you're gonna be honest about it,
John
and you're gonna
John,
answer the
save
question
the
of what
Western
is
lady. The
wrong with it.
lady needs saving from her retail peril.
Oh, she's working at McDonald's. How terrible.
No.
Poor
1 second,
capitalism.
I even tried to clarify I'm not being very sexist here, and the triggering still occurred.
You're
No,
just
but you
simping.
really are. You can't say
just
I'm
want to
not
get
being
a
sexist
very,
and then
very
be
quick word
automatically
out.
sexist.
What part of what I just said was sexist? Give me one example.
The
Just
point
so
that
I
I
can shut
want
you
to,
down really quick.
John, the point that I wanted to make, and this is a point you
Or
can't
not.
shoot
Let
me
the other
down
guy
for.
interrupt for you. Just run away.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to make a very quick point. I've been trying for a little while here. The only point I wanted to make, John, is I think I understand the issue here. The issue here is you talk too much and you don't let the women get a word in edgeways, and they don't like you for it.
You just got done interrupting the girl. I had to like try to hear what she said because you wouldn't shut up. You're a hypocrite. Now sit the fuck down.
What?
John, I'm gonna make my point very simple for you to understand, so you can really get this, right? You've been sitting here arguing how capitalism is the superior economic system because it's preserved.
Oh no, we moved on. Don't mention capitalism.
John. You've been sitting here arguing about how capitalism is a superior economic system because it's preserved the evolutionary roles of how we're supposed to date and how humans are supposed to breed. Okay? And yet you have not acknowledged that capitalism has led to the greatest upheaval of this process ever, which is the equality of women. That's right. Capitalism created this equality of women. It lifted them up, obviously, to make profit. They want women in the workforce. They want an
Well, that's the
equality.
problem. Well, that would be the problem, right? Because, in other words, our opposition, all they have to do is claim that it all makes sense underneath a utilitarian moral framework. That's all they have to do.
So you
Well,
admit
there's two. Well, hang on. There's 2 points here. Firstly, capitalism did not create the women's liberation movement. People did, activism did, and governments did, and states did, working
Hear,
together.
hear.
Capitalism doesn't care. It just has profit motives, right? If the profit went towards women, notice how late after women actually entered the workplace, after the liberations movement, even if capitalism was primarily concerned with profit, it still didn't happen. So there you go. The second thing as well is this idea that capitalism is enforcing traditional relationship dynamics. The very purpose of capitalism is to alienate you into individuals so that you become individual profit units. That's why we're more alienated than ever and isolated. That's the point. Capitalism does not preserve the family unit. It's not useful to it. Why get the profit of one family unit when you could get the profit from 6 individuals?
Yeah, I think that was the coolest thing anyone said since I've been in the room. But
oh, it flies in the face of everything you were saying about capitalism preserving our
Yeah, it was
daily.
against you, John. Sorry.
Yeah, what the fuck? How do you not understand that?
well, I even tried to make myself clear that I took the position that all they have to do is adopt a utilitarian moral framework, and they're fine. So in other words, all they have to do, I mean, I can defeat them, I think. I can just say all the ends doesn't justify the means, maybe. But long story short, all they have to do is say thrusting women into the workforce was justified for something you said. You said profit. Like even Christopher Hitchens acknowledged
Honestly,
this.
just be a socialist at this point, and I'd excuse
Well,
all your bullshit if you were.
no, listen, the point is that the reason why it's justified to throw women into the workforce and just blatantly regard their psyche is because of the massive amount of economic profit that we garner. Because you have to understand, if you make it to where women can't work, that's essentially half of the workforce. So, in other words, long story short, every single country that allows women to work, they prosper tremendously.
Exactly. This is my whole fucking point. And you see how this flies in the face. You see how this flies in the face of what you were just saying, 10 minutes ago about
I'm
how.
just trying to clarify. Hold on. I'm just trying to clarify that this would still be okay and morally okay to do. In other words, we could ignore the negative psychological consequences under a utilitarian moral framework. I think that's important for you guys to understand at the
How is an ignorance of harm utilitarian?
Well, they
Like
could
you're just saying we can have a utilitarian framework providing
Wait,
it.
let's actually have
we
a
can
thought
have a
experiment. John, what do you define as what do you think utilitarian?
For simplicity's sake, it would be the greater good, right? So in this example, we would simply say that the greater good is prospering economic systems, and that greater good outweighs the negative psychological effects of the women.
The greater good compared to what? If you have no base of comparison, you can't say greater. Greater than what?
Then the countries who the direct comparison can be made. You just have to compare these countries to countries who don't let women work, and absolutely what you're going to end up finding is that like what Christopher Hitchens was acknowledging, that every single country who lets the women work, they have plenty of incentives to do so because a lot of wealth is garnered, etc., etc. And all you'd have to do is look at the countries who don't let women work to see that they fucking suck and they're poor as fuck.
I'm sorry, I'm really lost.
You're exactly right. You are exactly right, John. You're exactly right. You're on the right chain of thought here. So why can't it be utilitarian to decide that it's not good to have these fat capitalist rich people banging out all these chicks?
What happened?
Why can't it be utilitarianism, right, to stop these fat rich, billionaires from banging out all the chicks in our society?
Because for the greater good, you would say that you're going to leave too many behind, like I mentioned before. Like we live in a society that wealth can garner you a really good mate, and so when your example is fat people banging girls and shit, I'm assuming you're talking about wealthy fat men, right? Because let's be honest, fat men who aren't wealthy aren't banging all these girls, right?
Wealth can get you a good mate. It can also get you a really shitty mate. That's
John,
not
wouldn't it
what?
be for the greater good? Wouldn't it be for the greater good to cut that down?
I do think so. If your goal is gonna have to be, you're gonna have to be talking about the most optimal genetics reproducing. Like that's gonna have to be at the core foundation of your epistemology. And I think it would all make sense.
What's optimal?
This is now flying against the you can be fat in a capitalist society, not in John John's
is
world.
a very important question. You would immediately have to contend with those kinds of questions, like what would be optimal, right? So you would immediately point to things like fitness. Like fitness, by definition, is something like your ability to adapt to your environment. If you're really, really fit, then you did a really good job at it, right?
Okay, John, I drop you in the middle of the Mojave Desert. If you die, can we kill you?
So the
I know that's
most
ridiculous.
fit people
I'm fit for my
would be the
chair.
people we would elect to reproduce. It's that simple, guys.
So, in other words, optimal is survival based on what? Like some naturalistic, rambling imagination that you have, like hunter-gatherer, or
I
what?
said fitness. Do you know
physical
what the fuck
fitness,
means?
physical fitness, mental fitness, and in which case, what
All of
kind
the
of
above.
physical fitness? Because I assure you that the South American Andean people have a bigger lung capacity than you, but most of them probably couldn't run as far as you. I don't fucking know, right? So, what do you mean by fitness, mental or physical, and how do you cash that out? Professional what?
Professional fitness as well.
Just to be clear, you're not going to be able to cash it out in like some scientific method, like what you might be asking for here.
Then your moral system is pointless because you can't actually define it.
This
you
is
can't
exactly what
define
the
any of the boundaries
do when they
of it.
undermine morality and ethics, right? They say, "Oh, he is
Define any of the boundaries of your system of morality, or even this thing about optimal genetics, right? Define any.
You guys, people like you. The problem with people like you is that you always throw the baby out with the bathwater and miss out on all the glorious insights.
Oh, I'm sorry. You have a moral system
things
that
up
can
front.
turn on a pin. Like, again, you've argued against yourself at least 4 times since I'm come in. I will ask you again,
Give me one example. Give me one example. You said I did it 4 times. Give me one example.
what are the optimal genetic
Yeah, you're not
characteristics
going
that
to do
we're
it.
looking for under utilitarianism?
Since I've been in here, I've heard you argue for and against women equality. I've heard you argue for and against capitalism. I mean, I don't know where you stand.
Yep. Yep.
Are we even talking about philosophy?
You're cutting out.
I think I may have muddied the waters, but it was necessarily so. Like I guess it was necessary to bring up the moral frameworks in which these things would be justified.
Muddied the waters. You're
We
like
were
the
talking
Mississippi
about-
Delta on a spring tide.
We were talking about positions in which, if you adopted a certain moral framework, would be justified. So
What moral framework?
Unfortunately, I had to bring in the frameworks here.
What
Like I said
moral
before,
framework?
underneath a utilitarian moral framework where
Yeah,
the goal is the greater good, some of these ideas then would become understandable. Right?
So what you have is you have a concept. Let me get this right, John. So you kind of have a concept of the broad, sweeping, kind of overarching view of how you want things to go, but you haven't really got all the details for those pieces in place below that framework to allow you to go through in a sort of process form of how you would go from A to Z in your method. I think that's where people are having a problem. You're talking really abstract.
Yeah, I don't even want a methodology. I just want a definition of the word better.
Yeah, I think you are onto something. I think you are people. I don't know if you want to say a criticism or your question would be the first thing you would have to acknowledge, or like the first critiques you would have to contend with.
The problem with
And I think
utilitarianism
it gets into the idea of objectivism, I think.
Yeah, it's entirely subjective and yet masquerades as an objective ideology. That's the fundamental problem with utilitarianism. It pretends it's a subjective moral system that can override everybody else, and ultimately it just depends on your subjective opinions of what is better, what is good, and what the greatest number of people are, and who you even count as people.
You might be able to combat that. You might be able to combat that subjectivism with some kind of pragmatism.
Well, pragmatic things can be subjective and vice versa, right? Pragmatism and subjectivism aren't antonyms.
Yeah, so I think that people could get what you think they're missing out on through pragmatism. Like I think some pragmatic thinker could say something like, there is objective beauty, for example.
Okay, define it.
They would just